My name is Stephen and this is my channel, Heart's Delight Exports. So today I'm making traditional Newfoundland pea soup. Now there's three different quality levels, for lack of a better term, to Newfoundland pea soup. You have the high-end pea soup made with salt meat, which means that at a certain point, close to where I am at now, which is about there, the broth would be getting a little cloudy. It would be very strong on salt, and about at that point you'd want to take all the liquor off, or at least most of it, because it would be extremely salty. Even with the amount of dried peas that you're going to put into it and the peas soaking up a fair bit of the salt, it would just be too much. Now, mid-range, or the middle class version of pea soup that way, would be using leftover ham bones from a ham roast and cutting up leftover ham to put into it for more meat content later. That's the one I'm going with, because, you know, I had 3 or 4 bones in the freezer waiting for this to come up. So you saw where I'm at with that. I got the bones boiling nicely, the broth is coming along. I have a load of peas here in soak. Now this is commonly argued to be an unnecessary step. I'll leave it as a matter of opinion whether that's true or not, but it does take a lot of the dust from all the peas moving and rubbing and in the package together. It does take a lot of that off. Some people argue that that's not a beneficial thing, that dust is just as valid a part of the pea as anything else. Okay, I'll leave that to you. But the pea getting hydrated again will cut down on cooking time a bit. That's the one benefit to it. So I'm going to take this and drain off most of the water here in a second. So you can see how cloudy that water is there now. Whether you believe or don't believe that those small particles of peas are beneficial to your soup or not, I don't see that you're losing any amount out of it for doing it. So I'm going to drain this off and put it in the pot with the bone. I'm not going to worry about getting all the water out, because I'm going to add some more water to the pot anyway. And I have a lot of peas here. This might be way too much for this pot. I really hope it's not, but I'm going to do it anyway. I got all the peas in there. It's brought the level of the water up because of this placement pretty good, but I'm going to add a little bit more water. So while that's boiling, I have veg to peel. I'm going to peel up my turnip, my carrot, my onions. I wish I had some parsnip to put into it, but I don't. And I have some leftover ham in the fridge that I'm going to dice up, and that's going to go in the mix roughly about the same time as the veg, maybe a little bit beforehand, because once the veg goes in, the timer really starts ticking. Once you put your vegetables in there, once they're cooked, everything needs to be cooked at that point. If you make the mistake and your peas are very undercooked and you put your vegetables in too soon, then the vegetables are going to be cooked and your peas are not. And trying to sort through it and pull out all your pieces of vegetables so that they don't continue cooking and go to mush while you're letting your peas cook more, that's a real bad idea. That's a bad day. So you're much better off letting the peas cook for longer. Even if they turn out to be overcooked, it doesn't really matter. They're going to disintegrate. They're going to cook until they fall apart to mush anyway. That's the goal. But I do want that meat in there a bit longer than the vegetables. So I will have to be a little bit careful, and probably 10 or 20 minutes before I put the veg in, I'll take all my diced up ham and I'll put that in. You're still wondering what the third method of pea soup was, aren't you? Wait for it, it's coming. Okay, so my pea soup has been bubbling away here for a little while, and it's time to make some additions and subtractions. I could just smush the pea. Just crush it. Look, there it goes into a fine paste. So now, need to carefully take out the bones. Need to make sure to find all the smaller pieces like this one, because once all the veg goes in and all the diced ham goes in, that's going to be rather difficult to find. So now I'm going to take out my diced ham and put that in there. Okay, so my pot of peas and ham have been cooking for about an extra 10 minutes. You can see where the peas are to now. They're mostly gone to mush. I took apart the bones, all the bits and pieces of meat that's in between the bones, and saved that. And now it's time to put in all the vegetables. Now, because I have so much in this pot and I needed to add some water to it, I'm going to have to take some of this out. Alright, so you can see how thick that is in there. I'm going to take some water from my kettle. And it doesn't matter at this point if I make it a bit runny, because all this, there's still chunky bits of peas in there. The chunky bits of peas will cook down and make it thicker again. All this veg needs to cook, and I now have a secondary pot of pea soup that also needs to cook. I need to add a bit of water to that as well. Now I have 2 pots cooking. I can't say this is exactly unexpected. Between 20 and 30 minutes now before the vegetables will be cooked out enough, and I'm adding water as I go, as I need it. Now that I have a second pot of pea soup on the go to make room for everything that I've got going, I have an easier time trying to balance out and make sure that my peas are not getting too thick. This is about the point in time, the point in the cooking project, where most people start getting the burning issue. Right about now, your peas are broken down enough that they'll settle to the bottom of the pot fairly easily, and they'll stick on and start to burn. So you need to be very careful of your temperature. Make sure you're not cooking too hot. It still has to be enough to boil the vegetables, unfortunately. So this is one of the times where you need to be stirring the pot. A lot of the times, a lot of people would tell you, just leave it alone. I've said it before. Leave it alone and let it cook. You don't need to touch it. Well, this time you do. You need to keep stirring it up every few minutes. You shouldn't leave it for more than about 5 minutes or so, and stir it again. Stir it again, stir it again. Over and over. Make sure it doesn't burn. Make sure it doesn't settle. My second pot, my smaller pot, has actually been thinned down with water too much at the moment. It'll take a little juggling when both of them are cooked to actually make sure that they're both thick enough. But at some point maybe I'll let the bigger pot settle a little bit, and I'll try to scoop off some thicker peas, thicker clumps of peas on the bottom of the pot to put in the smaller pot to thicken that up. So what I hope will happen at this point is that I'll be able to bottle what's in the bigger pot for later use. It's about 6 liters of soup in there easily, and the smaller pot will have some. Okay, so my pea soup is just about ready. The thick one has gotten thicker, the thin one has gotten a little less thin. See here, the thick one is nice and thick. It's kind of the way you want it. Thin one, well, it's pretty watery. But I'll take the thin one and I'll start adding it to the thicker one so I get a better consistency to it. Now, when you're making pea soup, one of the big important things to remember, which is going to sound contradictory, is salt content. You need enough salt into it to make it taste better. You have a lot of things in here that leach the salt out, and it cuts down on the salt flavor, that bit of saltiness to it. Now, if you're using salt meat when you're making your soup, you'll find that you don't need to worry too much about that. You need to worry more about keeping the salt down. But because I'm using ham, I didn't start off with a high salt content in the first place. So I've been checking it and keeping a good amount of I've been making sure that there's enough salt in there that I can taste it, and it doesn't taste just of the peas. The truth of it is, the peas rob a lot of the salt content. You put potatoes in there and they absorb so much of the salt content. Turnip and carrots to their own amounts. It can really make it a bland soup. You don't need much in the way of anything else into the soup to make it a good flavor and all, but you do want to have enough salt. Like I said, if you got salt meat, then you probably got enough salt in there, and you need to worry about knocking it down enough. So if you're cooking pea soup with salt meat, always reserve some of that pot liquor from earlier, and if you need to, when you're thinning down the soup as the peas cook and you need to make your adjustments, add a little pot liquor if it's not salty enough. Then you don't have to add more processed salt to the overall dish. So what's the third way that you can add meat to pea soup? Well, if you were dirt poor back in the day, well, maybe you had none. Maybe you had no meat in the pea soup at all, and it was just peas. But if you could afford it, you would use corned beef. Take a little chunk, maybe so big, cut it up, put it in the bottom of the bowl, put your hot pea soup onto it, and pea soup would cook down that chunk of potted meat. It's already cooked very fine anyway, so it would start to disintegrate and open up. I remember a few times, I remember, everybody else says I'm wrong, but I remember my mother trying it once or twice with pea soup. Put the whole can in the pot, and within about 5 minutes you had little flecks of red into it, but you couldn't find either big piece of meat at all. But that was one way to take care of it. Now, I am planning on bottling this stuff, so making sure that I have a good consistency is important to me for that. That's part of the reason why I wasn't worried about having extra in a side pot and making it too thin. After supper is over and I've allowed this to cool down a little bit, I'll take that thinner soup and I'll add it to the thicker, and I'll make sure that it's thicker than water, but I don't want it to be a super thick pea soup, because as it sits there in the bottle, even if it's only for a couple of days, all those peas are going to keep cooking and it's going to get thick. Even if it starts out fairly thin, it's going to thicken up a bit, and I don't want it to cause problems in the bottle, making the bottle explode or popping the top off because the peas have expanded and pushed things around too much. So some things there to be worried about with bottling pea soup. The point of these videos I've done, this is the third one now for doing soup and stuff, is to put so much in the cupboard and preserve it for future need. Now was the right time to do it. You can see how the peas are coating the wooden spoon here. Nice and thick. Some people might like to have dumplings with your pea soup. Myself, I like homemade bread with it. Make a bit of a sandwich with it or dipping bread into it. That's the way I prefer pea soup. I'm not a big soup drinker anyway, but pea soup is one that I do enjoy. This is going to be the end of another video. I'm not going to film the bottling process, both because it's going to be a few hours from now before I start that, and I'm not an expert. I'd rather you find bottling information from somebody who's more competent into it than I am. So there's another video for Hearst Delight Exports. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back and visit me again in the next video that I put up. You have a good day. You need to be stirring the pot. You need to be Hearst Delight Exports.